Hi there, everybody. I'm Lucas Martell, creator of Walkabout Mini Golf, and today I'm going to give you a little tour of our new course called Mars Gardens. So you start off in the airlock, but pretty quickly you emerge into our biodome. So there have been a lot of requests, and we had wanted to do a more sci-fi-y course, but also something that was as different from Tethys Station as possible, just to give a really, really wide variety. And when we were thinking about Mars, one of the things that really got us was sort of like just, it's so beautiful, but it's also fairly desolate. And so what we ultimately decided to do was to kind of create this more enclosed space that you're within, but you still get these really breathtaking views out to the Martian surface. And one of the other cool things we started playing around with pretty early on in development that was a source of debate was gravity. So this course is actually going to ship with two versions of gravity. So the default is going to use the normal gravity that people are used to, but for those that are wanting an extra challenge, we also have the option at the very beginning of the course before you launch into it. You can choose to set gravity to Mars gravity for the entire course, which completely changes the play style, the experience, the strategy. Highly recommend everyone check it out. It does take a little while to get used to, which is why we ultimately decided to make the normal gravity the default, just because it's a little bit more accessible. But it is super fun, and it's one of those experiences that you can only get in VR. So we highly encourage everyone to check out the course like normal, but then come back, but then come back and play it in low gravity and just see how different it feels. Oh, my Wi-Fi connection dropped. Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So this course is kind of a spiritual successor to Arizona Modern. It might be kind of difficult to spot the differences other than the, let me try it one more time. So this course is actually kind of a spiritual successor to Arizona Modern. Very architectural in the gameplay style. It even sort of like implements, and I think even takes further the idea that we had for Arizona Modern, which was sort of playing off the idea of skate parks. So one of the things that really defines the gameplay on this course, and is why the low gravity works so well, is that just about every hole has these sloping kind of cratered borders, which means that it is incredibly easy and in fact encouraged to get the ball airborne on almost every single hole. So it really, it's a lot of fun, and it really sort of emphasizes the gravity when you do go in and play it in low gravity mode. But yeah, we just felt that the Arizona Modern was very, very popular with a lot of different players, but we also wanted to give it a distinctly different vibe. But it does implement a very different take on sort of modern architecture. This whole course was kind of inspired by architects like Zaha Hadid and Frank Gehry, the Sydney Opera House. We looked at a lot of architectural references because we really felt that that sort of like emphasized the futuristic sci-fi. We wanted this to feel like, even though it's on Mars, that it still feels like it's this oasis. So the story behind this one is that this would be sort of kind of like the central park for the colonists on Mars, and where they're growing all their food, but it also serves as recreation, and it's the one place they can get out and actually sort of like at least feel like they're in open air, as opposed to the usual tight confined spaces you think of when you're talking about space exploration. If you listen close, you might even notice the all the bird sounds and a couple of the ambience. Those are actually being piped in through, we've got little rock speakers all over the place. So if you're wondering where the bird sounds are coming, look around, and just about every spot that you can hear a bird coming from is actually coming from one of these little rock speakers that were placed all over the place. Again, to try to give the Martian colonists a little a little taste of home, or at least that feeling of nature that they don't get when they're doing most of the normal science activities. One of the other really fun ideas that we started playing around with was the idea that because this is where they're growing all of their food, they are genetically manipulating stuff, and they're not constrained by the gravity of Earth, so they're able to grow food that is quite a bit bigger. We even emphasized that in a couple places where I think this is one of the great gags that Don got in, where this is actually, kernels of popcorn, except one single kernel of popcorn is so large that it bursts and pops open the microwave as soon as it pops. So you'll see all sorts of fun references to just the giant fruit, this pear that's the size of a beach ball. We just had a lot of fun injecting some of that humor into there. This course also has a fun little detail added, where as you get close to any of these monitors that are sort of showing the status of the crops, you could even see sort of some messages back and forth to the colonists. So just one more way to sort of inject a little bit more story and a little bit more about the inhabitants of this place, and that will all kind of come into play with the fox hunt. So this right here is probably one of my favorite views of the course. When we were designing it, this was sort of one of the linchpins that we had, and if you go up to Godview, you can actually see how this is all enclosed in a very sort of like tight contained bubble. But just that feeling of looking up and seeing all of the levels that you're eventually going to go to was one of those big architectural things that we knew that, again, you look out and you see the dry marsh surface, you look back and you see greenery. But creating this was a very unique thing, unlike anything that we've really done before. In particular, the thing that really made this course possible was designing and building it in VR. We used Gravity Sketch a lot. In fact, there's a video that we'll be dropping probably just in another day or two that actually really goes through and shows how this whole course was constructed. But from this view, you can actually even see that the entire course, all of the architectural layers, it's a single piece of geometry that's all sculpted out of continuous curves that run through the entire length, and even most of the holes are even built into that. This hole is actually one of the few exceptions that is not built off of that one single piece of geometry, which, just from a technical perspective, made it a challenge, because every time gameplay needed to change just a little bit, it meant updating this entire massive piece of architecture. So it was definitely a challenge to do that, but I think the end results are worth it, because it really gives a highly, highly different feel than anything else that you've seen in one of our courses. It's also not the first time that we're actually using some more of these smoother surfaces, but it's definitely the most extreme example of us playing around with everything being faceted except for all of the curves. From here, you can also get a pretty good view of one of the other big pieces that we kind of built everything around, which is this central robot column that is watering the crops, fertilizing, scanning, picking, doing all that sort of stuff. To go even deeper into some of the architectural ideas that we had imagined that this entire course was actually 3D printed. So there's actually a few buildings right now that they're starting to 3D print out of concrete, and the way they do it usually is they have a giant column with these robot arms that will actually do circles around the column in order to build up layers of concrete. So essentially that's how they managed to create this entire vast surface on Mars. But then once they were done, they had this giant column in the middle, so rather than just taking it down and having to somehow get it out of the airtight dome, they just turned all of those robot arms that had originally built this place into some farmhands, something to help with with all of the watering and the taking care of the crops. So little details like that I realize aren't necessary for mini golf, but it really helps us to sort of ground the place and make it feel like there is some kind of larger ideas at play in terms of how this place was built and why it was built the way it was. So here we are in our sort of water treatment facility, This is one of the few places that you actually sort of get out of the main chamber, but we really wanted, a variety of locations sort of within this space. I'd say that was one of the challenges as well, is that we did want to make sure that each of the locations that you're in still has an identity. And a lot of that actually came from the crops that we were placing around. So you'll notice here that we've got all of the sunflowers out facing the sun. The children of Mars have actually built out a fun little fort out of this giant gourd. If you come around to the side, one of my favorite details that Emma Mercado, one of our 3D artists, added in. We definitely wanted it to feel like that this space was lived in, and again, that there are children here, so they're actually sort of building out rope swings, and they've got inner tubes that they're swimming in the ponds and everything. So all of those little details that we encourage people to just step off the beaten path a little bit to find some of those fun details that we've added in there. So as I was saying, one of the big things that we really chose to differentiate locations was the crops that we've placed around. So the first level is much more sort of the drier, more arid. You've got corn, you've got wheat, you've got grapes. I'm guessing that they're probably making wine or something here. But yeah, we've kind of got all of that more sort of like wheat, corn, berry stuff over there. And then as you get up onto the second story, this is where we start getting into more of our gourds, pumpkins. I believe there was conversation about there's a whole Thanksgiving meal that's essentially sort of that they're prepping for. And again, everything's sort of fun, oversized. One of the other elements that we also played around with was the waterfalls, and sort of like knowing that water would be an integral part of how this place would work. So we tried to build in the pathways of like irrigation and just sort of how you would actually be moving water throughout this facility, which creates some really cool views. A lot of very tight waterfalls, but in a very designed, again, kind of architectural approach. I'm going to pause for just a minute to catch my breath, but also to give you a chance to sort of like direct me if anything stands out that you want me to focus on. Okay. So here we are coming up to hole 11. Night mode was also a lot of fun with this course. One of the other inspirations that we had looked at was Little Island, which is one of the new parks that's actually built on, I'm trying to remember if it's the Hudson, not the East River, in New York City. More recent, but it has this really architectural, very cool, modern sort of like urban feel to it. But at night, when you get all of the lighting and everything lit up, it just really feels like a magical place to be. And so yeah, night mode on this course is definitely stunning, and again probably harkens back a lot to Arizona Modern, just in how that space, once you get all the little ground lights and everything sort of like reflecting off the greens, it really sort of like highlights the space in a really just gorgeous way. This is definitely becoming one of my personal favorite places to hang out within the game. It's just a very, very chill, very zen place to spend some time. Yeah. And yes, gameplay again. It's sort of like it's a good mix of several different courses. It does have a little bit of the Alfheim that the riding the curves. However, Alfheim, even though it had curves, it was still walls that you were riding against. This is much more about sort of catching the edges and more you have to be a little bit more delicate in terms of how you catch. It almost again feels like skating, where you're trying to grind on the very corners of these to get around and maybe hop over these little dune shapes at just the right moment to get close to the hole. But yeah, coming up with gameplay for these it was a lot of fun and also a much more kind of organic process, because there would be a hole like this where just raising up the peak another, couple of centimeters would drastically change how the hole played and what was possible to do on the hole. So there was a lot of that dialing in to really get it to play just how it was intended, and to be, the right amount of challenge and fun and intended frustration, I would say. Yeah, so one of the other things that we've just found really seems to that people love is just seeing benches. And if this is supposed to be a city park, for the Martian residents, of course you'd want to have places to sit down and chill out. So we've definitely found that making spaces within Walkabout that are just kind of cozy is really nice. And the number of people who actually after a game will just come and just sort of hang out on the couch, and you can actually sit in your chair and have a conversation while gazing out at the level. I know it seems like about half the time that I'm playing, I end up sitting, just because for me a lot of it's development. I'm just sort of hopping in and out a lot, but yeah, the number of people who after playing a longer game, it's nice to just chill out and spend a little bit of time in the level. So we like to craft a few of those spaces and encourage people to just take a pause and hang out with the people that they're playing with. So, I believe that this is hole... I have to check. This was hole 14. We're coming up to hole 15 on the third level. This is another great spot where you can really kind of get a sense of sort of how this whole thing is constructed and how all of these different curves sort of align together. But yeah, it was definitely a balancing act to get it all to fit in and create those appropriate spaces where you can kind of get windows through to see down into everything, but then also close some of it off. Make sure that you've got a few spots that feel a bit more cozy. One of the other things that we designed it all around was that when you're starting on the bottom floor, it intentionally sort of hides what's up here so that it allows us, even though it's all big one open space, to sort of reveal it. The other thing that we were also really after with how we laid it all out was so that as you climb higher and higher, you get more wider views of the Martian surface. So once you get out to, this is the third level here, you can actually start to see beyond the lip of the crater. You can see all the settlement. You can see all of those details that maybe were kind of hidden from you before. And ultimately, a lot of that just came down to the fact that we realized that the Martian surface was one of the things that people were here for, but being on the Martian surface is a little less interesting than seeing a vast sort of epic view of it. And the last element of that was something that we designed into the top story here, which this entire biodome is built onto sort of the ridge of a crater. And so you're never able to see outside the crater until you get up to hole 17 at the very top. And then we finally give everyone that big epic view out to the Martian surface on the backside of the crater that you've never been able to see before. And we played around with adding some more stuff, adding some more settlement, but ultimately it just felt like seeing just sort of like that empty vastness. We actually even grabbed some topographical data of the actual Martian surface in order to map. I forget what crater that actually is, but that's actually one of the topographical areas of Mars. Hole 17 here. We also figured that you're at the top. Again, our nod to Arizona Modern. We wanted to kind of get a few cactus in. Maybe they're making some. Using some of the tuna from the prickly pears. But we also felt like if this is a park, of course there also needs to be sort of like that big water feature fountain thing that celebrates, the human spirit of ingenuity and either conquering or living in harmony with Mars and sort of trying to return it to a green, verdant place, which is what I'd always thought that maybe their big ultimate goal of settling Mars was. And then finally, we've got hole 18, of course. You can't do a space course without a loop-de-loop. Another little fun nod back to Tetha Station, but this one also has a pretty significant gameplay difference in terms of how the hole plays. And then finally, again, from the top here, you also get that wide view in both directions of all of the front and the back side. And we had the idea sort of like this would be sort of central command. This would be where they're actually trying to, they're helping run the robots. They're helping manage all of the crops and everything from up here. So I believe that by the time this video drops, the course will be out. So check it out. Like I said, be sure to check out low gravity mode because that is super, super fun to play. Videos can't quite do justice to how it feels when you hit your ball and really feel what Martian gravity would be like. But yeah, thanks so much for playing and checking out this video.